It's not an exaggeration to say Rome Odunze is the best wide receiver prospect the Chicago Bears have ever drafted. And that includes both on the field and off the field.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can follow Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, we'll be joined by the host of Locked On Huskies, Roman Tomashoff, to talk about Rome Odunze and what he saw from Odunze throughout his time in Washington, from his recruitment into the program, sticking there through some coaching changes, and obviously having the biggest season of his career just this past year in what was also a really good wide receiver core at Washington, with a couple other good players that they were all competing for spots with. Odunze was not the highest recruited member of that bunch, and so we'll kind of look at what he brings to Chicago coming out of Washington, his biggest strengths, and maybe he doesn't really have a lot of major weaknesses, but where you could see even more improvement from Odunze as he tries to develop even further into his career. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about Odunze's fit in Chicago specifically and how he aligns with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and what that'll all provide for Caleb Williams under center. There's a lot of goodies to get into with Roman here, so let's jump right in. Joining us now on the Locked On Bears podcast is Roman Tomashoff. He is the host of Locked On Huskies here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and he is also the site editor for the Huskies Wire as part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. Roman, I know it's a lot of Huskies going through the draft for you in this process, so I appreciate you joining us today. But no surprise, Rome Odunze, the first one off the board, or I guess did you think maybe Troy Fautanu could have been potentially earlier? But I guess did this play out draft night, day one, how you expected?
So not really, because seeing Michael Penix go 8 to the Falcons was amazing. No, that's fine, because that was my reaction when I saw it too. I was like, whoa, and not in a bad way, because I love it. I love the fit. You know, the whole Kirk Cousins thing, people are going to bag on the pick. And I mean, I understand that aspect, but as somebody who will always just be a fan of Mike after getting to cover him for so long, I love that fit for him. And hey, I'm Locked On Huskies on February 16th. As my co-host Lars Hansen tweeted out, I called it. I said, I would love to see Michael Penix on the Atlanta Falcons. Did I think it would happen at 8 overall? Nope, but I'm going to take it and call it a win, which is so great. But no, and talking about obviously more specifically about Rome, that was the chalk pick for so long, right? And the whole question was, would he get past the Giants? You know, would the Chargers go offensive line? Would they go wide receiver? And I'm just so happy, because especially when you look at what this fit is with him, with Caleb Williams there, with DJ Moore, with Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, with everybody else in the room. One of my bold predictions is I think that this could make the Bears a top 10 offense in the league moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of excitement building around what that combination could be, not only just for this year, but for the long-term future there. I want to go back, though, to Rome Odunze, like coming into Washington, the recruiting process for him. I know, like, he came in, I think, in the same class as Jalen McMillan, one of the other Washington receivers. I think, was McMillan like higher rated coming out? Like, what were the expectations for Odunze coming in there, and how did that sort of play out over the course of his career, building up to this past season where he really ran away with it?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, because yes, you're correct. They both came in as part of the 2020 class. Jalen McMillan was like a top 50 player in the country, while Rome, depending on where you looked, he was a high 3, a low 4-star, where the differences between the two guys it was never about athleticism, where they were both such fantastic athletes. Jalen McMillan was always a little bit faster coming out of high school, but Rome had that track speed, that long speed, and Rome wasn't as refined of a route runner as Jalen McMillan was coming out of high school. So there was always just kind of this question of, okay, both these guys are going to be really big. Where I remember, when Rome committed to Washington, he was down to UW or Oklahoma. So it was never, anybody that wants to go play in an offense with Lincoln Riley, yeah, I respect that. So getting him over Oklahoma was always such a big win. And the question with him was just always going to be, okay, is he going to fill out his frame a little bit? Is he going to put on some weight? And is he going to refine himself as a route runner? And very quickly about Rome, we learned that he is just such a determined guy. He works so hard, and he's really great at just working really hard. I know that sounds really silly to say, but he's somebody who over the last 2 years has really ground every single day to turn himself into one of the best receivers in college football, and seeing it all pay off as being a top 10 pick is just so cool to see.
So there's an alternate reality where he could have been Caleb Williams' teammate at Oklahoma and then reunited as teammates again on the Chicago Bears. It comes full circle one way or another in that process. That's cool. But I wanted to get into specifically this Washington receiver core. We talked about McMillan a little bit there, and we could throw in Jalen Polk as well. Like how did that dynamic work with the three of them there? Like how were they used in this offense and found targets to go around for all of them?
Yeah, so that was always tough. Where so early on in 2021, when the trio first kind of came together, Rome missed some time with an injury. Jalen Polk missed almost the entire year with an injury, and Jalen McMillan actually missed a little bit of time too. So then coming back, it was a very different offense in 2021, where shout out to the Green Bay Packers and one of their worst analysts of all time, John Donovan, who was a defensive analyst after being UW's offensive coordinator in 2021. Let that sink in for a minute. After John Donovan was just horrendous at scheming up an offense, where in 2021 it was, all right, we want to see these guys develop. Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb come in 2022. They bring in Jamarcus Shepard as the wide receivers coach. And those three really helped cook up a giant in what was going on. And, very quickly throughout spring practice and fall camp in 2022, it was, looks like Rome's going to be a guy. It looks like he's going to be the number one in this offense. And he absolutely was. And in 2022, Jalen McMillan also had 1,000 yards, where he actually, I believe, had one more reception than Odunze in that season. But it was very close, where there were always targets for both those guys. And in 2022, Jalen Polk was kind of, he fit in there where he had somewhere between 35 and 40 catches, but took those for 700 yards and like 7 touchdowns. So they always found a way to work him in. And then in 2023, Jalen McMillan missed 2 months with a knee injury. So Rome, who was already like through spring practice and fall camp especially, it was very clear that even though Jalen McMillan was still an excellent football player, Rome had transcended really, where the All-American season, everything that he did, you could see that coming from a mile away, where everybody just kind of looked at each other. I remember watching spring practice with my Locked On Huskies co-host Lars Hansen, and we were just kind of looking at each other. Every time Rome took the field for a one-on-one, it didn't matter who it was. It would just be, oh, that poor soul is about to get cooked by Rome Odunze every single time. And so we saw everything that was coming in that aspect. And then Jalen Polk really stepped up in Jalen McMillan's absence, and he was the 1,000-yard receiver alongside Rome in 2023. So it all really had a way of finding ways to work out, whether due to an unfortunate circumstance like an injury or just the scheme. They all got consistent touches, which was so cool.
This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I use Gametime all the time. I actually just used it to go last night to Bucks Pacers Game 5 elimination game in the Eastern Conference playoffs. It was a great time, exciting game, and something that I would not have gotten to without Gametime, because at Gametime, I can trust my ticket purchase. I get to see my view from my seat before I buy my ticket, so I know exactly what I'm getting, and they have all-in pricing, so I'm not getting hit with any surprise fees at the end that make my tickets cost way more than I thought they would. And their last-minute deals help me save big on my tickets. I get the best prices every time with Gametime. And it's not just sports. There's concerts, comedy shows, theater events, you name it. There's live entertainment in your area. You can find tickets on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Rome had such a big 2022 season 2 years ago. Do you know, it sounded like there was some consideration for him coming out at that point, but then came back and obviously had an even bigger season. Do you have much of a sense of was it for him, was it about coming back to try and, make the college football playoff and go to the national championship again? Or was it about personal goals? I mean, or was there really not as much of a consideration to leaving as maybe we thought he might have?
It was certainly a little bit of the first two, where once Michael Penix came back, he kind of set in motion everybody else coming back. Where, edge rushers, Braylon Trice and Zion Tupuola-Fatui decided they were going to come back. Troy Fautanu decided to come back, where all these guys had the option to leave. Jalen McMillan said he would come back. And then Rome was kind of the final piece of the puzzle, where he was the one who took the longest to decide, because honestly, I think that he could have been the first wide receiver taken if he had come out in last year's draft. But he decided to say, because those personal goals were making college football playoff. They were making a national championship. And he obviously got to accomplish all those things with his team while also boosting his own draft stock as well. So there was really just a combination of all those things that played into his decision to come back.
Seems like when you watch Rome Odunze, and certainly you read any scouting reports or analysis of him, he can pretty much do everything pretty darn well. I mean, he's big, fast, strong, good hands, contested catches, route running, so when you look at him, what do you think is the biggest strength there of a guy who can do everything pretty well? What stands out as he can do it all, but this is where he really is at his best, or really thrives, or is better than everyone else at this one area?
I would say it has to be the contested catches, where that was one thing that I remember he wasn't necessarily the best at in 2022. And that was one thing that Jamarcus Shepard especially pushed for him to come back. I remember him saying to me, because we asked about that a lot in fall camp. One of the things he said was, I told Rome, you're 6'3", 217 pounds. You need to play like you're 217 pounds. And he did a fantastic job of that. He pulled in, I believe it's 21 of 27 contested catches this year. And, he's such a smooth route runner. He does such a great job releasing off the line of scrimmage. I just want to make sure I touch on all these things, because these are all traits that I believe not just to be, above average or very good. I believe that they are elite traits that he has. And he's really good at all those things. He's got fantastic hands. He can run every route in the route tree. And I would just have to say that contested catches kind of stand above that a little bit, because he is on the bigger side. That's something where once he gets to Chicago, I feel that, once we get to October, November, December, you could see him being, the primary read when you get to the red zone. Just throw up a fade ball and just see if Rome's going to come down with it, because he does it so often. I feel like that's where you're really going to see him excel at the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. In a similar boat, though, seems to be great at everything. Doesn't really seem to have any kind of major weakness. It seems like if you try and find a weakness, you're nitpicking a little bit. But is there anything, even in a nitpicking way, that okay, he could stand to be a little bit better at this, or maybe he's not elite at this, he's just pretty good at this, and not top of the line? Is there weakness? Feels too strong, but is there an area of improvement that you'd say, I'd like to see in the NFL Odunze take another step in this department?
So, Lauren, you took the words right out of my mouth there, where it's nitpicking to an extent, because that's exactly what it is. Where I would say that, there's a little bit in terms of yak stuff every now and again, where, he'll get the ball in his hands, and every once in a while he'll get tripped up by the shoestrings, something like that. And that's something he can absolutely improve on, where he doesn't have a whole ton of yards after the catch, where that was just the biggest thing that I heard just from scouts, from whoever it was that I would talk to, or just other media people that I like to listen to. And a lot of that was kind of scheme dependent, where, he's sitting out on an island so often, where sometimes he's pulling the ball and stepping out of bounds anyways. Like the one I like to think about is the go ball that he had against Texas on the sideline in the fourth quarter of the Sugar Bowl, where there are so many plays like that where, it's going to be a 30, 35 yard gain. And then he's just going to step out of bounds because that's just the way his momentum is taking him. But, every once in a while he gets tripped up by the shoestrings. But for anybody who thinks that he's not going to be able to, pick up yards after the catch or make plays in space, I would like to point them to the punt return he had against Cal when he took it about 80 yards for a touchdown. So, that's absolutely something that he's able to add to his bag as well, where he can get a little better, sure, but it's not like he can't do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the punt returns, because I think I saw he only had 3 career punt returns, but one of them was for a touchdown. How did they decide when to use him? They're why did they use him there occasionally and he seemed to be great at it versus not using him there all the time? What was the role there for him?
So it happened once or twice early in his career, and then when Jalen McMillan got hurt, they just said, okay, let's put Rome back there and make a play. And of course he goes out and scores a touchdown. And then I think the thought process was, let's not get this guy hurt. Let's make sure, we can leave him on the field in what we actually need him to do, because punt returning is a really nice bonus, but that's certainly not why he's on this team.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Last thing before we let you go here, what is his personality like? I mean, we see him in interviews and he seems like a nice guy. You mentioned him being such a hard worker. Is he more of a, the kind of quiet, keep to himself, work hard in the corner, speak softly, carry a big stick kind of guy? Or does he have more of a personality to him that we'll get to sort of see maybe as he, gets more comfortable in the NFL, maybe not right away, but how would you describe him as a person off the field and on the sidelines and stuff?
It's, as somebody who covers the Washington Huskies, I get called a homer all the time for this, but I cannot stress this enough. And it was really nice to see some other members of the media just kind of assert this assumption just on social media over the last, 24 hours since he's gotten drafted. Rome Odunze is the single greatest person I have ever covered in my time with the Huskies. He is so kind. He is so humble. He is such a just a legitimately good person to everybody you meet. I remember the two of us had a conversation just after the spring game in 2022, where he was talking about going to study abroad in Italy for a couple of weeks. And as somebody of Italian descent who has also been to Italy for an extended period of time, we had a really long conversation where he just asked me oh, I'm so excited to go do this, go do that. I remember talking about gelato that he needs to go try and just all the different little things. And that's just who he is on a day-to-day basis. You'll see all these videos of him just going out and talking to whoever it is that comes up to him, that asks him for an autograph, anything like that. He is just truly such a wonderful, genuine person. And I know I'm saying a lot of really big things that seem very hard to live up to, but he won't just live up to these things. He will exceed all of them. And another thing I can point to in just terms of his personality and who he is and just the kind of person that he is on a day-to-day basis, when somebody asked him at the combine, oh, do you think you can land a plane? And he says, no, we're going down. All souls have perished, whatever it is that he said. That's just who he is. He's just that genuine, that fun. He knows who he is. He owns up to it. He's confident, but not in a cocky, over the top kind of way. He is somebody that, and this is a term I don't use lightly, he's somebody who can be a true role model for anybody it is that looks up to him.
Man, it really is the dream draft pick for the Chicago Bears. And Roman, I really appreciate your analysis and your perspective. Before we let you go, let everybody know what kind of stuff you're doing on Locked On Huskies this time of year. If people want to get more info on Washington, what can they expect from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So over on Locked On Huskies, we're going to be doing a whole lot of spring practice coverage for all the next Huskies that are out there, because they're going to be a whole lot of fun guys coming down the pipeline. There's another guy who, looks a lot like Rome Odunze as a wide receiver in Denzel Boston, who I absolutely love watching. We're going to be talking a lot about him, a whole lot of recruiting stuff, whole lot of draft analysis, because I have a great team that'll come on from time to time, to every once in a while, where me and my co-host Lars Hansen, we've got a whole bunch of fun draft people that we'll have on, probably to talk a lot about Rome Odunze to the Chicago Bears and everything like that. So yeah, please feel free to subscribe to us over on Locked On Huskies, wherever you get your podcasts. And we're also going to be doing a whole lot of fun breakdowns and everything like that over on Huskies Wire, which is at uwhuskieswire.usatoday.com. Yeah, we're everywhere. You can find us every single day on all those platforms.
Excellent. Roman, thanks so much for your time, and enjoy all these Huskies going to the NFL.
Lauren, thank you so much for having me.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends and do timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And then the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, and of course, some hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day, with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of them include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, or even frenzies on rent. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Thanks again to Roman Tomashoff from Locked On Huskies for joining us on the podcast today. And I want to take a step back from here and look more specifically at Rome Odunze in Chicago. I mean, Roman obviously having the perspective on Odunze at Washington. I think we learned a lot there about who Odunze is and what we can expect from him in Chicago, because he really is this guy who can do a little bit of everything and can do it all. And that makes it really easy to fit him in to this Bears wide receiving core that already has DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And then, of course, the tight ends, Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett and DeAndre Swift in the backfield. It feels like the possibilities are endless. And I wanted to use this time to go back to something we talked about earlier on the podcast. In the lead up to the draft, we talked to Matt Waldman, who puts together the rookie scouting portfolio where he goes really in depth on quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends in particular in the NFL draft. And when we talked to Matt Waldman before the draft, we talked about kind of distinguishing this wide receiver class and, how you might separate Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors based on the differences in their skill sets, and also depending on what team they go to, it might kind of change what that role looks like. And I think the conversation sounds different now when you specifically apply Odunze to Chicago. So I just want to listen back to a quick clip of Matt Waldman here on the podcast talking about Odunze and specifically him and Marvin Harrison in this part of the conversation. But just a quick clip from there that I think you can kind of recontextualize now, and it sounds different when you apply this with the idea of Odunze in Chicago and how he fits with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen.
Now, Rome Odunze could probably play all three positions for you. Do you necessarily want him to be a slot receiver? I'd say not with his speed and his size. You probably also see him as a split end, but you can move him around the formation to be a flanker to start with. And if that's easier so that you can get him on the field to give you strong production right away, because you have a good split end who's going to be lined up tight to the line and there's going to be a defender jamming him, and that guy can win that way. Whereas with Odunze, you can say he can win sometimes, but not as often. But if he's backed up a few steps behind the line and doesn't have to deal with that immediate press, and we can get that kind of value out of him right away because of his route running and pass catching, we don't have to worry as much about him beating the top corner. Well, we get a 2-for-1 because he can play all three positions, but we can get a value from Moore as a flanker, whereas maybe Harrison isn't as strong there. And so you could see how he might fit into multiple organizations' plans, because we're not just talking about who they have right now, but who's going to be there next year or 2 years down the line, and how they foresee, where they're growing with that. And if they see Marvin Harrison as or Rome Odunze as their future, number one split end, like say Devontae Adams, the guy that I think he's easy comparison to in terms of stylistically and where he could go in terms of talent. Well, if you can't use him right away there because you have a good split end, again, you can use him at flanker or as a big slot in certain scenarios and have multiple receivers on the field and help your offense right away. Whereas with Marvin Harrison, maybe it doesn't help you as much if you already have a good split end, like a Mike Williams, for instance, maybe before his injury at the top of his career, or T. Higgins, or somebody along those lines, where you go, we already kind of have somebody there. Maybe Harrison will be better, but are we really going to bench a player we're paying a huge contract to so that we can put this player on the field? Or would it be better for us to draft another receiver who can give you close to that production of what Harrison's going to provide down the line, but we can also use them in tandem, and we could put Odunze in maybe the Jamar Chase role, more often to the T. Higgins type of player we had. We're just talking about these players being in different teams than they really are.
Again, that was just a small portion of our conversation with Matt Waldman from the April 19th episode of Locked On Bears, if you want to go back and hear that full conversation if you missed it. And you can get his full analysis of Rome Odunze in the rookie scouting portfolio. It's like 6 or 8 pages of really super in-depth analysis of every aspect of Rome Odunze's game at mattwaldmanrsp.com. But I think he makes a really good point there about Odunze in particular, right? He's got the height, the weight, the speed, the vertical ability, and the route running to where if you want to put Keenan Allen in the slot like all time, you can stick Odunze on one side and DJ Moore on the other side, and he can handle that role. He can get off a press. He can handle being jammed up at the line of scrimmage, and you can free up Keenan Allen to just be that shifty slot receiver. You know, Allen's not as fast as maybe he used to be, but he has a knack for getting open and finding that space over the middle of the field. And, you know, Allen and Cole Kmet can just eat over the middle of the field, and it can be Odunze and DJ Moore going vertical on the outside that stretches defenses in a lot of different ways. But if you want to try and get Odunze some of those easier matchups and move him inside in the slot, and maybe, you know, in some two receiver situations, if he and DJ Moore are lined up on the same side of the field, you know, Odunze can be that big slot receiver. And obviously he's going to go against maybe slightly smaller cornerbacks that he can be more physical with, but maybe slightly faster cornerbacks in the slot that might be able to stay with him a little bit more. And it's a different type of skill set you're asking Odunze to have to work with in that spot. He can get easier releases though, so there's an opportunity to set up some production there. And I think it just opens up everything for Shane Waldron when you have a receiver with that kind of positional versatility to line up on either receiver spot or in the slot there and find what works best for him and then what's also going to work best for everyone else in that offense. It's certainly a dream come true for Shane Waldron, who couldn't ask for anything better as a supporting cast for his young rookie quarterback coming in. Certainly means no excuses for Shane Waldron either. Like, he's got to be a great offensive coordinator with everything the Bears are putting in front of him here, and Rome Odunze is a big part of that, especially as we go through Odunze's career, where if Keenan Allen is just a one-year guy in Chicago, if that's how it plays out, you can go into year 2 and feel like, okay, Odunze can rotate in the slot, or he can be your 2 outside receivers, and then when you want the matchup, he can move in the slot, or you can move DJ Moore in the slot sometimes. Like, you've got guys that can do a little bit of everything for you at wide receiver, and that is so valuable for the long-term future of Caleb Williams and this entire Chicago Bears offense. So hopefully this gives you a more holistic understanding of Rome Odunze on and off the field. If you learned something today from either of our guests, Roman Tomashoff or Matt Waldman, then I hope you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to keep breaking down this Bears draft class all throughout the rest of the week. We're going to take an in-depth look at these undrafted rookie free agents to see who has the best shot of making this 53-man roster. We're going to look at expectations for Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze in year 1 and beyond, and so much more. So I hope you'll keep tuning into Locked On Bears each and every single day, because in exchange, I always promise to make time for you to bear down.